are in something of a unique position as a teacher and writer about the Gurdjieff work, in that you actually met Gurdjieff and knew him while you were a child.
Yes, I did.
Could you describe some of your early memories of the man?
Well, I remember the first time I saw him. I was quite young. I don't know exactly how young. And it was in New York. And my parents disappeared somewhere. And there I was in a room full of people milling about. And there was somebody who had a strong magnetic attraction to me. And I moved toward that man. And I reached down and I kissed him. And it was Gurdjieff.
What a beautiful first memory.
Yeah, and my mother says, although I don't remember this, that he turned toward Madame de Salzman, who was sitting next to him, and he said, and I hope this is true, "Elle a des possibilités," because he spoke a little French, a little Armenian. She has possibilities. Mm-hmm. So I'm hoping that that really did happen. So I remember being drawn to him. He was like a big grandfather. And I don't know if it was that day or another day when, and it was during the Second World War, so everything was very scarce, like chocolates and things that kids like. He gave a party for children. And in that party, we were given a whole box of those chocolates that have cherries inside, maraschino cherries, and I hadn't even seen a chocolate in so long, and to have a whole box, it was a wonderful thing for a child. Mm-hmm. So I experienced him as very kind, although many grown-ups who wrote memoirs found him extremely tough and confrontative.
He, I suppose, used what was appropriate for the occasion.
I suppose he did. He seemed to me one of those people who was free enough to do that.
Well, Gurdjieff is noted for having really combined the Eastern and Western traditions in a unique way to try and take the mystical thinking and meditative practices of the East and combine them with the disciplines, the technologies in the West, our way of making things really work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he did. He grew up about halfway between the East and the West. You know, he grew up between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea. Mm-hmm. And he was
in Central Asia.
And he was a person who left the Armenian church and the family that he had and went to seek truth with a bunch of friends. A lot like a Dharma bum or somebody who was a dropout in the New Age period.
And many of our viewers may have seen the movie based on his autobiography,
Right.
Yeah, Meetings with Remarkable Men, in which he sort of describes that search.
Right.
Peter Brook's film, I believe.
Exactly. Of course, it's very unlikely that those memoirs, supposed memoirs with quotes around them, actually had to do with his experience. A lot of it was analog and metaphor and teaching material.
Oh, really?
I think so.
Interesting.
Yeah. But he certainly did go somewhere, and it's very clear that he was involved with Buddhism and Sufism, and probably Taoism also.
Yeah. Well, he has a reputation also for having been something of a scoundrel. You know, there are the stories that he was a Russian secret agent in Tibet, for example.
Right. And it's unclear whether that's true or not. In fact, one of the things about a man like Gurdjieff is you can't tell whether he's using his life to teach and making up stories, therefore, or whether he's actually recounting the truth.
He's sort of in that crazy wisdom tradition where it almost seems you cannot judge this man by the standards by which we ordinarily judge people.
And of course that's very dangerous, as you know.
Yeah.
Right. It seems that way, and at the same time we know we're on very shaky ground if we don't somehow have a common sense response to somebody.
One would think so, but let's look for a moment at some of the finer things that we have in the legacy of Gurdjieff. I've been very struck by his notion, and it's one of the most powerful ones that I've heard from the Gurdjieff tradition, that we are all really asleep. We're not awake. We think we are awake, but we are not.
That's certainly the fundamental idea, not only in the Gurdjieff work, but in Sufism and Buddhism. In fact, every esoteric part of every religious tradition says there's something wrong, something clouded, something blurred, and something clotted about the attention of human beings. And such as we are, something is the matter with us.
It seems to come across most clearly in the Gurdjieff work,
Mm-hmm.
that point gets made over and over again.
Over and over again, right.
Mm-hmm.
And also, one is given some help
Mm-hmm.
in getting out of the mess we're in.
As with all other traditions, I suppose there's some help.
In each religious tradition, there is an esoteric form
Mm-hmm.
in which real help is given. The exoteric form will tell you what you have to do. And then there'll be some people who will try to help, giving you specifications and guidance on how to do what has to be done.
Mm-hmm.
And the Gurdjieff work was that without the dogmatic exoteric form on top of it. But you know, he did call his work esoteric Christianity.
Oh, he did?
Oh, yes.
Now that I was not aware
Mhm.
of. That's very interesting.
But it didn't
to
have
me.
anything to do with the kind of Christianity that exists in churches and cathedrals here.
Well, he writes in the Meetings with Remarkable Men that he wandered all over
Mhm.
Central Asia and
Mhm.
perhaps even into the Far East
Mhm.
in search of some kind of genuine teaching about the higher powers that were available to
Mhm.
human beings.
He found that the people, and this is true of so many teenagers, the people who were around him, teaching him, the clergy and the professors, that only had opinions. Nobody actually had knowledge, real knowledge. So he had to go in search of it.
And one senses, at least in this parable of his life, that he went to great lengths, crossed the oceans and walked across deserts and did
Right.
everything he could to get to that. And it's ironic for a person who seems to have influenced so many literary people today. There are hundreds of books about the Gurdjieff work, that he himself doesn't come across as a scholar in the least.
Oh no, he wasn't a scholar, but he was a seeker, and he was a serious man and not a frivolous man.
He spoke 20 languages, I understand.
I don't know how many.
Yeah. Another concept, I do want to get into the methods that he used, but one of the other concepts that he wrote about, which struck me a lot, and I think modern psychology is more and more coming to this point of view, is that we are all composed of many different selves. I think Gurdjieff described them as being like puppets inside of us, and they each take control of us at different times. That we're not really just one self, as we often think of ourselves to be.
That's a very important, the fragmentation of the human psyche is a very important part of the Gurdjieff work. And it's the initial condition that people find themselves in as they begin inner work. And the idea would be, of course, to be trustworthy for oneself and others. And that would mean to master those fragments, put them all into one coherent and integrated whole. I mean, that is what human integrity is. And as we are without work, we don't have integrity.
So the state of the average individual is a person who is both asleep and fragmented.
Yes, and there are terrible consequences to both of those things. Not only is the sleepwalker unable to see and hear, he's in a dream, but also the person says that they can promise things. And in fact, somebody else, one person makes the promise and somebody else is there to live up to the promise, and often promises aren't kept.
Yeah, especially, I suppose this is serious when we make promises to ourselves.
Exactly.
I suppose it's one of the reasons why, as they say, the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Right. If you can't keep your promises to yourself, are you a human being? That is to say, Gurdjieff used to say, are you a man with quotation marks or a man without quotation marks?